They say your gut always knows before your brain is ready to catch up. I used to think that was some feel-good nonsense people said to make themselves feel better after the fact. But now, I think it might be the only honest thing I've heard about relationships. It was a Thursday morning. Nothing special, just another routine before work. I was still in my pajama pants, standing in the kitchen and waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. She was at the counter, scrolling on her tablet and humming something under her breath. Something about the way she moved felt different. Not huge, not dramatic, just a little too careful. I didn't catch it at the time, not consciously. But it was there. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon toast and fresh espresso. Outside, the sky was gray and spitting rain, and the weather matched my mood. We'd been off lately. Conversations that used to flow now ended with forced smiles. Her laughter, once so contagious, felt rehearsed. But still, I didn't think that was what was happening. Not yet. And then it happened. As I walked past her toward the sink, her tablet buzzed just once. A notification preview popped up and I wasn't even trying to snoop. I wasn't leaning over her shoulder or hovering. It just happened to catch my eye at exactly the wrong, or maybe exactly the right moment. The message said, "Last night was fire. You're better than I imagined. Face-blowing kiss." From someone named C.W. Time froze. Not in a movie-style slow-motion way, but more like everything around me dimmed and narrowed. My brain tried to make it make sense, tried to search for any logical, innocent explanation. But deep down, before I even looked at her, I knew. I absolutely knew. She reacted fast. Reflexes like that don't come from nowhere. The moment she noticed where my eyes had gone, she tapped the screen and closed the message. Not hurriedly, not frantically, just quickly enough to show she didn't want me to see more. Then she turned to me with this little smirk like she'd caught me doing something wrong. "Oh my God," she said, rolling her eyes like I was being ridiculous. "It's an inside joke. CW, that's Carson from work. We were talking about the client dinner last night. It's just dumb office humor." She shrugged like it was nothing, like I was some paranoid husband looking to pick a fight. "You really need to work on your insecurity, babe," she added, sipping her coffee without missing a beat. I stood there, the ceramic mug in my hand suddenly feeling too heavy. A dozen things went through my mind, questions, accusations, reasons to push. But I said nothing. I nodded, gave a forced smile, and told her I'd be late coming home from work. "Traffic's been bad lately," I lied. But the truth? The truth was louder than her voice, louder than the quiet morning. I'd seen her reaction. I'd seen how prepared she was. You don't react like that unless you've got something to protect. And I know her. I know how she talks with her coworkers. I've seen the casual banter, the group messages, the memes. This wasn't that. This was different. The tone, the emoji, the name. CW didn't feel like some harmless inside joke, it felt like a code. And her explanation wasn't just weak, it was rehearsed. Like she'd played the scene out in her head and was just waiting for it to happen. Still, I said nothing. Not because I believed her. Not because I didn't want to fight. But because I needed time to think. I needed to step back, watch, and see what came next. One message isn't proof, not legally, not logically, but emotionally. It might as well have been a confession. The rest of the morning was surreal. She moved around the house like everything was normal. She reminded me to take my umbrella, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and told me not to forget about her sister's birthday this weekend. Like nothing had happened. Like my world hadn't just tilted a few degrees off its axis. I got into my car and sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine. My hands were on the steering wheel, but I wasn't really present. I kept seeing the message, reading it over and over in my mind. The words seared into my thoughts. "Last night was fire. You're better than I imagined." Kiss emoji. How do you explain that away? How's that funny? What kind of inside joke talks like that? She'd never called me insecure before. Not like that. Not in that tone. That's the part that really stuck with me, not just the message, but how easily she turned it back on me. It was like she was prepared, like I was the problem now for noticing. Like her job was to gaslight me just enough to keep me silent, to keep the illusion in place. But I couldn't shake it. All through my commute, I kept trying to convince myself I was wrong. That I'd misunderstood. That maybe there was some explanation I hadn't thought of yet. I even told myself I'd ask her again, maybe later, maybe when we were calmer. But the voice in my head wouldn't let it go. Because I remembered something. A few weeks ago, she started keeping her devices face down. No more charging her phone beside the bed. No more casually reading work messages out loud. I remembered the night she came home late and her perfume smelled different. Sharper, muskier. Not the floral scent she always wore, but something that clung to her skin like it didn't belong to her. I hadn't said anything back then. I chalked it up to my imagination. Work stress. Overthinking. But now it was like those old puzzle pieces were rearranging themselves into a new picture. And I didn't like what I saw. The rest of the day dragged. I couldn't concentrate at work. I kept opening my email, then closing it again. My colleagues noticed I was off, but I brushed them off with a smile and a joke. Inside, though, I felt like I was unraveling. Because that message wasn't just about what she did, it was about what it revealed. That something I thought was solid was, in fact, already broken. And maybe, just maybe, it had been broken for longer than I wanted to admit. By the time I came home that night, everything felt different. She was in the kitchen, singing softly to some old Taylor Swift song, barefoot and pouring wine like she didn't have a care in the world. She smiled when she saw me, all warmth and sweetness, and asked how my day was. I said it was fine. I said traffic was hell. And I smiled back, because sometimes before you confront a lie, you have to watch it a little longer. You have to let it play out to see how deep it goes, how much of your life it's already infected. So I smiled. But inside, I was already rewriting everything I thought I knew about her, about us. Because when a truth this sharp cuts its way in, there's no going back. It's funny, when something cracks in your reality, even just slightly, everything starts to echo. Every conversation, every glance, every silence you didn't think much of at the time suddenly starts playing on repeat. And now, with that message burned into my brain, I couldn't stop the reel from running. I barely remember the drive to work that morning. I must have hit green lights all the way because I got there 15 minutes earlier than usual and just sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to be alone with the noise in my head. The thing is, the signs were there. They'd been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I started thinking about a month ago, maybe more. Emily had changed. Not all at once. Not in any way that would have raised alarms on its own. But little things started adding up. First, her phone. She used to leave it charging on the nightstand while we slept. It was a small, comforting thing, her phone next to mine, both of them lighting up occasionally with random notifications. It was part of our routine. But lately, she started leaving it downstairs. Too many blue lights, it messes with my sleep, she said one night, already under the covers. You should try it too. It made sense. She'd been reading up on wellness stuff, listening to those podcasts with the whispery voices that talked about screen detox and breath work. But I noticed how fast she got defensive when I made a joke about her being addicted to Reddit. Her eyes didn't smile when she laughed. It was one of those hollow, placeholder reactions. Then there were the conference calls. She'd always worked late some nights, nothing new there. But now she started taking calls in the car, or out on the patio, even in the garage. I remember one night hearing her talking low on speakerphone while she stood outside the back door. I came out to grab something from the car and she jumped, like I'd caught her doing something illegal. She fumbled her words, ended the call, and said it was just her coworker, Melissa, venting about a client. God, you scared me, she said, laughing, hand over her chest. Creeping up on me like that. I laughed it off, kissed her forehead, and went inside. But the weird part? Her phone was upside down the whole time. She never once looked me in the eye while we talked. And I remembered that. Now I remembered everything. Another night, a couple weeks ago, she came home late from a work trip to Seattle. She looked tired, but different. Her hair was a little too perfectly tousled, like she just styled it and then ran her hands through it to make it look undone. She always did that when she was trying to impress someone. And the perfume? That wasn't hers. I knew the scent she wore. I bought it for her every Christmas. That night she smelled like something stronger, deeper, muskier. A man's cologne, not mine. I asked, jokingly, new scent? She blinked too fast. Oh yeah, hotel shampoo or something. I showered right before checking out. You know those strong-smelling soaps they use. It sounded plausible. At the time, I believed her. But that was before I knew to question her. Before I knew how smooth she could lie when it suited her. Now, all those little moments came rushing back like shards of glass. The way she started checking her reflection more before video calls. The fact that she suddenly needed to go to the gym more often but came home without breaking a sweat. How she'd start fights over stupid things. Whether I folded the towels wrong or left the oven on too long, just to storm off and clear her head for hours. I think the worst part was realizing how easily I had accepted the distance. I chalked it up to stress, to busy schedules, to the fact that relationships evolve. But now I saw the pattern for what it was. She wasn't drifting from me. She was pulling away, hiding something behind that polite distance. Those neutral smiles, those mechanical kisses before bed. There was this night about 2 weeks back. We were watching some show on Netflix. One of those dumb thrillers she usually loved. There was a scene where the wife in the show lies to her husband about where she was. I looked over at Emily, just curious to see her reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just kept scrolling on her phone, nodding absently at the screen. It chilled me in a way I didn't want to admit. I asked her if everything was okay between us that night. I don't even remember how I phrased it. Something soft, non-accusatory. She said of course it was. Kissed my hand. Told me I worry too much. But now I think about the fact that she never looked up from her phone when she said it. That afternoon at work, I couldn't concentrate. My boss asked if I was feeling all right. I told him I was just tired. Didn't sleep well. I guess it wasn't a total lie. I hadn't slept well in weeks. It was like someone had turned on a black light over my life and all the stains I'd ignored were suddenly glowing. And now I couldn't unsee them. I thought back even further to her birthday maybe 3 months ago. We'd gone out to dinner, nothing extravagant, just the two of us at this nice little Italian place downtown. She seemed happy, or at least she acted like it. But the second her phone buzzed, her whole body language shifted. I remember watching her smile at the screen, one of those real smiles, the kind that curves slow and soft like she's reading a message that feels good. I asked who it was and she said just Katie, one of her work friends. And maybe it was. Maybe it was Katie. But maybe it wasn't. And maybe that smile wasn't for me anymore. There's this phrase I've always hated. You'll know when you know. I used to roll my eyes at stuff like that. Too vague, too mystical. But now I understand. Because when the doubt plants itself, it grows fast. You start second-guessing everything. Was that meeting really at 7 p.m.? Was that call really from the office? Why did she start buying new lingerie if she kept saying she was too tired lately? You can't think straight when suspicion takes over. It's like your mind gets hijacked by some insecure version of yourself who starts playing detective. And you hate it. You hate that you're that person now. The one checking phone angles. The one noticing perfume. The one replaying past conversations and listening not to the words, but to the tone. But the worst part? You don't even care how it makes you look anymore. Because the gut doesn't lie. By the time I left work that day, I wasn't wondering if something was going on anymore. I was wondering how long, how deep, how far, how much of my life had been a performance on her end, and what I was going to do with that information once I had it. I drove home on autopilot, barely noticing the traffic. When I walked into the house, she was in the kitchen, laughing into her phone. She saw me, smiled, and ended the call quickly. "Hey babe," she said. "How was your day?" I wanted to ask her who she was talking to. I wanted to say, "Let me see the call log," but I didn't. Not yet. I smiled back and said, "Fine, just tired." Because now I wasn't just doubting her. I was preparing. By the next morning, something in me had shifted. I wasn't frantic. I wasn't pacing around or searching her phone when she left the room. I wasn't even angry, at least not on the surface. What I felt was colder. A sort of numb calculation, like I'd stepped out of my own skin and was just watching everything from a distance. The kind of calm that comes right before the storm, when you stop needing proof because you already know the truth, you just need to see it written in ink. So I came up with a plan. Nothing elaborate, nothing dramatic. Just something simple to test the waters. I brought her coffee at work. She works in this modern glass office building downtown. I'd been there before, holiday parties, employee mixers, that kind of thing. I'd met some of her coworkers, though most of their names slipped through my memory like sand through fingers. But there was one I remembered, a tall guy with a dark beard and a voice that sounded like he was always trying to sell you something. Clark Whitman. CW from the tablet. I'd shaken his hand once at a dinner and instantly didn't like him. Too smooth. Too confident in a way that felt practiced. When I walked into the parking lot, I saw them immediately. There was no confusion. No delay in recognition. No question about what I was seeing. She was standing near the passenger side of his car, laughing at something he'd said. Her body was turned toward him, not just turned, but tilted in that soft, mate way you do when you're letting someone in. His hand rested gently, too gently, on the small of her back. A little thumb movement like he was drawing circles there. She didn't move away. I stopped walking. Clark saw me first. His hand dropped immediately and he straightened like a kid caught skipping class. Emily turned just a second later. Her smile died the second she saw me standing there with a cardboard tray of 2 coffees in my hand. Her face drained of color like she'd just seen a ghost. And then something I wasn't prepared for. She didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look surprised for long. She rolled her eyes. "Are you seriously stalking me now?" she said, loud enough that I heard it clear across the lot. The words hit like a slap. Not the meaning, the tone. Dismissive. Like I was the one crossing boundaries. Like I was invading her privacy. "This is a business conversation," she said sharply, stepping forward, her arms crossed. "You don't get to show up here and interrogate me like I've done something wrong." I stood there frozen. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That I had a bad feeling and wanted to prove myself right? That I couldn't take the silence and the secrecy anymore? And then it happened like something out of a bad movie. She slapped me. Not hard. Not enough to hurt. But loud. Loud enough that the sound echoed against the surrounding cars. Loud enough that a few heads turned toward us from across the lot. Some woman in a blazer actually gasped. Clark didn't say a word. He took a small step back, kept his eyes low. Suddenly, Mr. Confident disappeared. Emily's voice was low now. "If you ever pull something like this again, we're going to have a real problem." I couldn't breathe. I wasn't angry, I was humiliated. There it was. Not just betrayal. Not just deception. But a public scene designed to make me the villain. To twist everything upside down and make me question the ground I was standing on. She walked past me, her heels clicking against the pavement like nothing had happened. As if I were the problem. As if I had embarrassed her. Clark gave me a quick glance before he followed. Not guilt. Not regret. Just discomfort. Like I'd interrupted something mildly inconvenient. I stood there for a long time, coffee cooling in my hand. I ended up tossing it in the nearest trash can and sitting in my car, not driving, not thinking. Just staring at the dashboard, hands trembling slightly. I wasn't just watching something fall apart anymore, I was inside it, crumbling from the inside out. The slap didn't hurt. Not physically. But it shook something loose in me. I kept hearing it, the sound of it, the tone in her voice, the disgust in her expression. She didn't care about hiding it anymore. Whatever this thing was between her and Clark, it had moved past secrecy. She wasn't scared of getting caught. She was scared of looking inconvenienced. And that's when it hit me, she wasn't defending herself because she still valued the truth. She was defending him. She was protecting him. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember a single turn or red light. Just the dull hum of the engine and the sinking feeling in my chest like something inside me had caved in and I hadn't even noticed it happen. I kept replaying it, her body language, her words, the coldness in her eyes. There wasn't even a flicker of guilt. No fear of losing me. No sadness. Just irritation. Like she was disappointed that I was still clinging to some outdated expectation of who she used to be. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I'd made a decision. This wasn't going to be one of those stories where I begged, or pleaded, or fought to win her back. There was no version of that story I wanted to live in anymore. What I wanted now was truth. And after that? Peace. Because that moment in the parking lot didn't just confirm her betrayal, it confirmed something worse. She didn't respect me anymore. And once that's gone, there's no fixing what's left. I honestly don't know why I agreed to go. After everything, the message, the lies, the slap in the parking lot, I should have been done. I should have walked away right then and there. But when Emily came home that evening, pretending like nothing had happened, like the parking lot meltdown was just a misunderstanding, I felt paralyzed. She said she wanted me to come to a company dinner. It's important, she told me, walking through the kitchen like she wasn't still wearing the same face that had slapped me less than 12 hours earlier. Everyone's going to be there. It would mean a lot. I wanted to ask her if Clark was going to be there. I wanted to say, "You mean it would mean a lot for you to save face?" But I didn't. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see for myself. Maybe I wasn't ready to let go without watching it all crash in person. Or maybe, in some twisted way, I wanted her to look me in the eye while she lied again. So I could finally stop doubting myself. We arrived at the restaurant around 7. It was one of those sleek, modern places where the menus don't have dollar signs and everyone pretends tiny plates of food are art. The moment we walked in, I felt out of place. Emily was glowing. Not for me, though. That was clear. She had on this black dress, tight, low in the back, not something she would have worn around my family, that's for sure. She smiled wide, waved at people like she was walking into her kingdom. Then I saw him. Clark. Standing near the bar, laughing with another couple. He had on a blazer and that fake charisma look he always wore like cologne. The moment he saw us, saw her, his entire face lit up. And she walked straight into his arms. They hugged. Not a professional hug. Not a coworker hug. Not the kind of hug you give someone at a business dinner. It was longer than it needed to be. His hand went a little too low. Her eyes closed just for a second. And then, like salt in a wound, she turned to the people standing nearby and said, "Oh, this is Mark. An old friend." Old friend. The words hit like ice water. For 10 years, I had been her husband. Her partner. Her family. And in front of these people, the people she worked with, laughed with, made inside jokes with, I was nothing more than a name to toss around casually. Something to be forgotten after dessert. I stepped forward. "I'm her husband," I said, loud enough to silence the nearby chatter. A few heads turned. Clark looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Emily's smile twitched, but she tried to hold onto it. She touched my arm, gently, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Mark," she whispered, tight and urgent, "you're embarrassing me." I looked at her. The way she said it. Like I was ruining her night. Like I was some angry ex who had crashed her party. Like I was the one causing the scene. But the truth was, the scene had already happened. It was happening the moment she minimized me. The moment she chose appearances over honesty. The moment she decided to rewrite me out of her life in public while I was still standing right there. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a drink. I didn't storm out. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Do you really think this is okay?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. A woman nearby awkwardly cleared her throat and walked away. Clark took a step back. People started pretending not to listen while very clearly listening. Emily, ever the performer, tried to save the moment. "Can we not do this here?" she whispered, her jaw tight. "Please. Let's talk about it later." But later wasn't coming. Because I saw it now. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some temporary rough patch. This was the person she had become, and I didn't recognize her. The rest of the night blurred. I barely touched my food. She acted like nothing happened, laughing too loudly, talking too fast, pretending like we were still the picture-perfect couple. I sat beside her like a ghost, watching her play the part of someone I used to know. But something in me had changed. That dinner wasn't about celebrating her department. It was about showing Clark she still had the power. And showing me that I didn't. By the time dessert arrived, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was done. Because when someone can humiliate you in a room full of people without even flinching, when they can reduce your entire relationship to a footnote, what more is there to salvage? It's not about jealousy at that point. It's about dignity. And mine was bleeding out on a white tablecloth while she clinked glasses with the man who helped her K*LL it. There's a moment right before everything explodes when you can still walk away. I stood at that moment for what felt like forever. After that dinner, after being introduced as an old friend, after watching her cling to him like he was some twisted reward for surviving our marriage, I told myself I'd stay calm. That I wouldn't sink to their level. That I'd be better than all of it. But dignity only stretches so far. The next few days were quiet, like the calm after a storm. Or maybe before the real one. Emily didn't say much. She acted like things were fine. Kept moving around the house like nothing had changed, like we hadn't just shattered whatever was left of our marriage in front of a room full of people. Me? I barely spoke. I went to work. I came home. I nodded when she asked about dinner. I responded when she made small talk. But inside, something was burning. Not like a spark, not even a fire. It was deeper. Slower. The kind of heat that warps steel if you leave it long enough. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I didn't ask her why she introduced me that way. I didn't mention Clark. I didn't have to. The silence between us did all the talking. But Clark didn't get the memo. Because a few days later, I went to pick her up from work. Another attempt at being civil, or maybe some leftover part of me still trying to understand. I told her I was nearby and thought I'd save her an Uber. She said okay. Sounded caught off guard. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw them again. Same spot. Same dynamic. He was standing too close. She was smiling that smile, the one I hadn't seen aimed at me in months. I didn't even think. I got out of the car and walked straight toward them. Clark saw me first. He stiffened but didn't move. Emily turned a second later and froze. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. I didn't give them a chance. "You done?" I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. Clark laughed. That kind of patronizing, slow laugh people use when they think they're in control. "Mark," he said, like we were buddies, like this wasn't about to end badly. "Man, I get that you're upset, but this isn't the place." I stepped closer. "No? Where's the place? Where do I go to get back the years I gave to someone who replaced me without blinking?" Emily reached out. "Mark, please don't." Clark interrupted. "Look, I'm not trying to make this worse. Maybe we should talk somewhere else. Privately." There it was again, privately. Like I was the one dragging this out into the open. Like he hadn't already dragged everything sacred through the dirt. I don't remember deciding to do it. I don't remember tightening my fist or bracing for impact. All I remember is the sound. A sickening, solid thud as my knuckles met the side of Clark's smug, well-moisturized face. He stumbled back. Someone screamed. I think it was Emily. Maybe someone nearby. I didn't care. Tables rattled. A couple of employees came out of the building, rushing toward us. Clark touched his jaw, stunned. He didn't swing back. He didn't say a word. Emily rushed to him. Not to me. To him. "Are you crazy?" she yelled, standing between us now, hands on his chest like she was shielding him from some rabid animal. I looked at her. And then I laughed. A deep, hollow, bitter laugh that didn't even sound like me. "Now I get it," I said. "You were never confused. You were never torn. You just wanted me quiet. You wanted me to disappear so you didn't have to feel guilty." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "I gave you everything," I said. "I built my life around you. And you threw it away for what? Some smug office fling who won't even stand up for you when it counts." Clark started to say something, but I cut him off with a look. "You don't get to speak. Not to me. Not anymore." Someone from her office tried to defuse it. Some guy in khakis with a security badge asked if I needed to leave. I turned to Emily. "I'm leaving," I said. "You won't have to worry about being embarrassed anymore." And I walked. No more hesitation. No more doubt. I didn't run. I didn't storm off. I just walked to my car, got in, and drove. I don't know where I was headed at first. Just away. My heart was thudding in my chest, and my hands were shaking on the wheel, but my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. That punch? It wasn't about violence. It wasn't about revenge. It was a scream from my soul. It was everything I hadn't said, hadn't done, hadn't dared to believe, all crashing out in one motion. It wasn't righteous. It wasn't brave. But it was real. And it was the moment I stopped pretending this could still be saved. That night, I didn't go home. I ended up at a small lake just outside the city, the kind of place we used to visit when things were good. I sat there in my car, windows down, breathing in the cold air and letting the silence do what words couldn't. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about me. What I'd allowed. What I'd ignored. How I'd held on too tightly to something that had stopped holding me back. She texted me, of course. Called too. "Can we talk? Please come home." I didn't mean for it to get like this. But I didn't answer. I didn't even open the messages. Because there was nothing left to say. Her voice no longer had a place in my healing. I played it all back, the tablet message, the slap, the way she introduced me like I was a memory she hadn't erased yet. The way Clark stood there, smug and silent, like he hadn't stolen years of my life by accident. And I realized I'd been grieving a version of her that didn't exist anymore. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. When she walked into the house that afternoon and saw the packed bags by the door, she stopped cold. Her face collapsed like she'd only just realized I meant it. "Mark, please? I can fix this. I'll cut him off. I'll do anything." But I just looked at her. Really looked. And all I saw was someone I didn't recognize anymore. "You already did everything," I said. "That's the problem." I walked out with no screaming, no dramatic goodbye. Just finality. She cried. She tried calling again. Left notes, emails. None of it mattered now. And Clark? He disappeared the second things got real. But me? I stayed. I faced it all. And that's how I knew I'd already won. I wasn't broken. I was free.